So I've been doing this about 25, 30 years. I'm closer to 30 than 25. Safety and design, highway design, long time. My background is consulting, research, teaching, training for the last, almost 20 years. I've been doing, 15, 20 years, I've been doing training, both nationally and in Iowa. So I run the local technical assistance program in Iowa. There's one in every state. There's one here in Georgia. I think the director or program manager is across the hallway. We have Martha from Kentucky also. And I don't know if there's any other LTAPers in here, but we got one in every state. And take advantage of that. We do training for maintenance folks, professional engineers, transportation agent, anybody that's a staff of the transportation agencies. Other than that, Nicole, you want to kind of introduce yourself?
I'm Nicole One-Year. I work at the Institute for Transportation and with the National Center for Rural Road Safety. So I spend half of my time doing research, developing CMFs that we're going to be talking about today, and then the other half developing trainings and helping give these trainings.
Okay, so you're going to get lots and lots of information. And again, if you want to contact us, absolutely go ahead and contact me, Nicole. We can answer your questions, or we'll put you in touch with someone that can. So here's our goals today. We're going to summarize some data, basically show you what the problem is, and in each module we'll do a series of modules on different things, roadways, curves, unsignalized intersections, and we will summarize that data also. Nicole in module 2 is going to discuss kind of the methodologies. They're doing systemic safety across the street. How many of you have heard of systemic safety? Okay, which is probably why you're not across the hallway. We've got a bit in ours also. Module 2 is about both the traditional approach to safety, which is the hotspot identification, the four-step process, whatever you want to call it. There's been a lot of different process wheels and things like that developed over 20 or 30 years. That really doesn't change. And then you have systemic safety, and we'll talk about that in module 2 also. So kind of identifying the locations of where you're going to where you might want to do some improvements. You also see, by the way, some of these slides, we were doing real-time improvement. So while it was at the printers, we were doing some shifts, and most of the stuff will be in red. We updated the data to all the way up to 2016, so you've got stuff up to 2014, and that's going to be a point of discussion also. Another reason, and there's not a lot of that, we just wanted to make sure what we were showing you was up to date and current. Again, because this is typically a 6-hour course, the fact we couldn't get all the modules in. So we won't be doing signalized, but low-cost safety improvements, again, is an NHI course. And so you can actually take this course and take it for the whole day. We will do one real-life case study instead of case studies, which is what your slide will show, just because we couldn't fit 4 case studies into this today. So we have this introduction. Nicole talked about the safety data, and again, we'll do these 3, road segments and curves, roadsides and unsignalized intersections. And what you're going to see again is a series of, here's a safety improvement, here's one crash reduction factor, a crash modification factor that may apply. Think about this, and we'll talk about that. Okay, that's kind of how this is going to go in that case. And at the very end, we'll do a case study, which is a real-life intersection, which basically means it's not a real obvious solution. Which is how it often works. And we'll work in groups on that, groups of 4 or 5 and whatnot, and then kind of talk about that. So learning outcomes. What you're going to come out with, at least with regard to this introduction, is a little bit about how to define and quantify the roadway safety here in the United States. And if I end up replacing Georgia with Iowa on a regular basis, it's because that's where I'm from, and I do that everywhere I go. North Dakota was Iowa for every time I brought it up, and I had to apologize. We will talk about some terminologies, and the second bullet, I'll put it in a better term. We're going to talk about terminology that puts safety into context. We always talk about low-cost safety improvements, and right now everybody's thinking a different thing when it comes to low-cost safety improvements. What is low cost? What is safety? How do you talk about safety? What's nominal and substantive? How many of you have heard of these 2 terms? Okay, about 25% or so. Those have been around for, oh boy, probably 20 years at this point. And when it happened, I remember it blew me out of the water with regard to how you think about safety when you talk about nominal versus substantive. A little more terminology. talk about some data. All data is relevant. And systemic safety requires lots of data, or it requires data. Not lots of data. It does require some data. And then, of course, more recent data to see where we are. So this is what I meant by the change. So you all have this slide. This is fatalities. This is what we added. So you see it's in red here. So with the data, we just updated it. And remember, I can provide you these PDFs if you want. And you can see what's happened in the last couple of years. And here's what's happened in 2017. We're about doing this, right? Something along that. So positives? What do you see positive here? Downward trend. I mean, this is all the way up to 2006 here. Our economy was doing well when that was all happening. And then what else? Again, I remember these times. Here's your rate. This is fatalities per 100 million vehicle VMT. So we had a 5 and 8% increase between 2014 and 2016, and about 1% last year. Anybody here deal with crash data? And you're going to get my opinions. What happens with crash data? It goes up and down. It goes up and down, people. It always does. And so I look at this and go, man, yeah, we've been doing really well. And then it kind of leveled out and it popped a bit here. And now it's going up, but now maybe it's leveling off. We'll see. Maybe it goes back down the next year. How many of you are from states that have had increases in crash or fatalities last couple of years? What about last year? I mean, in Iowa, we went down last year, about like 10 or 12 or something. Yeah, it was a small, 1%, right? Something like that. So crash data does go up and down. So this is fatalities, of course. This is crashes, and then this is fatality rate. I show this. This is severity by crash. I show this for only a couple real reasons. This little blue line right here is fatalities, the percentage of fatal crashes of all crashes. So it looks like nothing, right? But recognize this is where we are, 37,000 people or more. So it's not nothing. It's not anything, right? Don't want to use a double negative. 25% approximately injury. The other 70% or so, 75, 78, PDO, right? So the crash improvements we do help all or just a few of these types of severity crashes. Some of them, it's not just going to be fatalities. It's going to be fatalities, serious injuries, property damage. Hopefully it all goes down, right? In fact, most of them will impact all of those. Sometimes we have to trade off, and you'll see a few of those, right? Perfect example would be, I'm going to put a signal in, and what happens to crash rates? Crash rates, because remember, this is 6 million crashes or more in the United States, and the percentages of those. So that's why it's such a small percentage. Lots and lots of crashes. This is fatalities, crash severity by crash percentage, right? So what happens to crash rates when you put a signal in from a two-way stop? It increases. Why does it increase?
Rear end.
Right. So rear end crashes, your property damage goes up, but what goes down? Your severe crashes. So sometimes it is a bit of a trade-off. Sometimes not. We'll talk a bit about roundabouts. Sometimes it's not, right? You get both. You get both for the buck.
So we don't care if crashes go up, as long as they're not severe crashes. But with the emphasis on improvements that will eliminate or reduce severe crashes,
Right.
we want this red to go down. It seems like it's
Right.
holding steady, or even it's holding the same line as it seems on that graph. It's holding the same line as what the other graph showed. So I would expect or hope that.
Right.
Even if this one doesn't go down, well, the fatality one doesn't go down.
Right. Right. So
If crashes don't go down, I want that red to go down. It doesn't seem like we're getting that in the last 10 years.
Right. So you're exactly right. We want to focus on those severe injury, fatality crashes. That's what the focus is. Something was happening here. It's not just volume related. It's something else. It's stuff we're doing. Yeah.
You add in factors like in the last 10 years, safety improvements in vehicles and
Sure.
improvements in medical
Sure. Yeah.
treatment. So, while we're having the same crashes, people aren't dying because they
Right.
go to the hospital quicker and get their
Right, right. So there's all kinds of things that impact fatalities.
Well, another thing you have to take into consideration, the aging population of the United States is going way up.
Mm-hmm.
So you're starting to see, the reaction time, you're gonna see a lot more accidents just from the elderly.
Right, and remember that, so we get automated vehicles. Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, there's certainly speculation about it and when it's going to happen and all that, but I did a Rumble Strip, I don't know, some of you might have been, a Rumble Strip webinar 6 or 8 weeks ago, and that was a question. Why do we need Rumble Strips? We got autonomous vehicles, sorry I said automated. Autonomous vehicles. Well, yeah, at some point, but right now we don't. And I drove to the airport a couple of days ago, 45 miles from where I live, and my brake light, the brake light was flashing at me, and there was nobody in front of me, and it happens all the time. And my lane delineation edge line thing was going off, and it was a seal-coated line that someone had put in that it thought was an edge. So these things aren't perfect even now. So we have a while to go. But yeah, all those factors. Go ahead.
What are your thoughts on centerline rumbles on curves?
So centerline rumbles on curves. We will talk a bit about centerline rumbles, and again, we can get into some of the details. We did, so they work, they are effective, but you've got, with rumbles, we've got the issues everybody's got to deal with, right? Noise, bikes, what are some of the other ones? Motorcycles kind of came up, but pavement joints and things like that. So there are some trade-offs there, yeah. But I live, again, half a mile from a 4-lane divided expressway, and at night, and when it's cold in Iowa, sound really carries, and I hear that rumble. And of course, what do I think? Because I'm a safety person. Somebody got saved. I'm good to go, and it's right on a curve. But I have a different viewpoint, I suppose, than some other people that are staying in the hotel right next door. All right, so moving on, we also have kind of weather and light impacts. So you've got normal, rain, snow, and the other unknown, and then daylight. So here we've got normal. Does it surprise anybody that most of our crashes occur during normal weather conditions? What's the bias there? A bit of a bias. Why do we think those numbers are high? What else is high? Speed? More normal, so it's all, when you're looking at data, it's all about looking at more normal days, higher speeds, more volume, yeah? Because if you look at dark but not lighted and dark, you can see, of course, the lighting maybe has a bit of an impact there too, which is a good thing. We'll talk at least about lighting in unsignalized intersections. So data, it's important to review data, sign up sheet there. Important to review data properly. We got single vehicle, multi-vehicle, roadway, roadside. So the blue here is on roadway, and again, you got black and white, I apologize for that, but you got on roadway here, and here, multi-vehicle and single vehicle. So what's going on with single vehicle, on roadway and off roadway? Fatalities. How are people dying off roadway? What? Roadway departure.
Hitting an obstacle.
Hitting some kind of hazard or obstacle. Could be an embankment, could be any number of things, right? Tree. Tree's a big one. Anything else? And what kind of crashes are we getting here with multiple vehicles on roadway? We're talking about it, right? Head on, crossing the center line. Again, single vehicles on the roadway, there can be some avoidance going on there, right? So you got a little bit lower numbers there. This one's going to look completely different than your slide, because what we did was to actually put the years from left to right. You have right to left. And this is the point I was going to try to make here. This is by type of functional class. So interstate, and it's just by year, from 2012 to 2016. Arterial, collector, local, and we added unknown into our slide too. And again, I can send you these PDFs. Just let me know. We'll leave the sign-up sheet up here, and you can sign up. Not surprisingly, again, in 2015, 2016, some of these have gone up. What I looked at, and if you look at your little chart, you realize they're all pretty straight across, right? So why is the interstate got low fatality? Got high speeds, not a lot of conflict points. There's fewer conflict points, higher speed, that kind of thing. Well designed, if that's how you consider a good design. Arterials, why are we way up here for arterials? More conflicts, speed, design could be a bit different, right? And that's a big, remember, functional class covers lots of different types of roadways, right? What I was surprised by was this. So we got, here's our local situation, right? Collector, local, and here, arterial. We got this jump up, which partially is due, no doubt, to the increase. But this went down, and then we had this unknown pop up. So I was going to say I investigated, but really I said, Nicole, go investigate this. What do you think might be happening there besides just the fact that crashes are, because something's happening here. Something's happening in the data that your chart, if you look at it on yours, this is straight across, this is straight across, that's straight across. Something else is happening here, right? There's not these dramatic differences in data nationally typically, like they just go crazy like this. So what do we think? Any ideas?
Distracted driver on arterial is getting killed and local is lower speed, so they're not.
Right, could be pushing the numbers up. So here's really what happened, right? At least in my opinion, I can only give you my opinion. I had Nicole investigate whether there was a difference in how the data was being put in with regard to functional class. They changed the definition, is that the right way to put it? Or
They changed the categories.
changed the categories in 2014. And the data changed. Now what we need to do, of course, is look at this year and look across. In fact, probably take out 2015 because the things were changing, if you will. And we need to look at the next 4 or 5 years to see whether, and look for a pattern. Just because there's a pattern doesn't mean there's really a pattern. When I see dramatic weirdness like this, I ask questions. And maybe that's the researcher in me. I don't always, especially at the national level. Now, when you talk about rural and lower volume, things can really, they can go up and down quite a bit. But to me, that's what's happening. So there is some volume, there is some other things happening here, no doubt. Crashes have gone up, or fatalities have gone up. But there's also the fact that it's trading off here. This hasn't happened. This is just by functional class. That hasn't happened for years. So something was happening with the data.
Well, if you look at Minnesota,
Mm-hmm. You look at Minnesota, yeah.
okay, over the past 4 years, or when you show the uptick in the 15 and 16 data,
Mm-hmm.
crashes and fatalities on trunk highways have increased. Crashes and fatalities on the local road system because of our local county road and safety plans
Right.
has continued down.
Okay.
So we're down 25%
Okay.
since we started our county road safety plans in 2011.
Yeah. Right. So he.
So you have, they were following each other, now they have the uptick, but we're continuing
Right.
to decrease.
So that's
I could believe that.
Right.
That was a Minnesota
right.
slide.
So that's another way of looking at this. Again, by state, basically what he's saying is his pattern in his state is like this. It's going in opposite directions. So some of this is also, even nationally, going to be the impact of what we're doing with local road safety plans and everything else. Now, if you look at it in a state and you see that pattern and the trends are staying, it means they're trends, right? You want to look at trends. It was just interesting because and then we flipped it, right? So the years were in the proper direction and everything else. This is great stuff. I could spend lots and lots of time talking about data. The rural urban thing, I think we've all seen this, right? The blue on the left is rural. Oops, sorry, is rural, different. That's rural. Red is urban. So it's a 50-50 fatality kind of situation, usually 45 to 55 nationally. You might say they're getting closer together. I guess, It's still between that 45 to 55 split. And it's getting closer, if you will, at least in the last couple of years, to 50-50 between urban and rural. And again, each state's going to be different. In North Dakota, I think it was 70 or 80% of the fatalities were rural. But it's a big rural state. And in Iowa, it's about 50-50, if I recall. I think Kentucky was that 50-50? I can't remember. But yeah, been in a lot of states. That 50-50 is typical unless it's, again, very, very rural. Rates, again, I'm assuming a lot of you kind of have seen this, but we're basically, here's your urban, here's your rural. So we're at, 2.5 difference here in 2016. Those lines have stayed pretty much the same when it comes to rate. Why do we think the fatality rate in rural is higher Volume's lower, yeah. Rate is by volume, so your volumes are lower. What else? Speeds are higher, so severity is higher, which means fatality. There's more fatalities, right? So, and what else? We talked a bit about it. Different types of designs, all that, right? Signing, again, I was in North Dakota talking about signing, even on gravel roads. I mean, I'm happy when I see a sign on a gravel road. Any questions on the data and kind of where we are with data? We have work to do, yes? Yes. So with regard to safety and your discussions in safety, I'm just going to click through these. Which of these do you use when you're talking about safety? To the layman or anybody else?
Safer.
Safer? Why do you say that? It's relative, yes?
You know,
So do you ever look someone in the eye and say, this roadway is safe? And you walk away. I've been in those public meetings and not said that. So we'll talk a bit about nominal and substantial safety. That's a very absolute, right? Can a roadway truly be safe? It depends on how you define it, right?
if it's closed, nobody's.
If it's closed and no one's using it. Good point.
Yep.
You see where I'm going with this? So more safe, safer. We have to deal, again, I think there's a slide either in this one or the next one about we deal with humans. Humans make mistakes. But everybody's seen, I'm assuming, the pie chart of where causes from crashes happen. And I've got to go through my spiel, I always do it. Crashes are caused by multiple factors. It's often not just one or the other. No matter what the percentages are, we can have an impact. Someone mentioned distracted drivers. What's something we can do to keep a distracted driver on the road?
Take their phone.
Well, take their phone. Pretty dramatic, but yeah.
Rumble strips.
Rumble stripes. Keep them in the lane, right? So that's one thing, sure. So there's things we can do. I often use someone runs off the roadway, there's an edge, right? And they come back on, overcorrect, go across the roadway, don't happen to get hit a telephone pole and dies. Police officer shows up, says, human error, right? That goes into the human percentage. Except if there wasn't a drop off and there was a safety edge and they didn't overcorrect and the telephone pole wasn't there, the fatality doesn't occur. Break the chain. If we can break the chain one way or another, that's what we want to do. So, little discussion. Is this roadway safe? And tell me why you think yes or no. What are you looking at to make that determination? And this is not supposed to be a long, drawn-out discussion.
The one with the stop sign or the one going the other direction?
Yellow signs in the wrong place.
Yellow signs in the wrong place. Is this a safe roadway or not?
Could be safer.
It depends. So what do you think? Just give me your opinions.
Could be safer.
Could be safer? Why do you think that?
Has some clear zone.
Could be a clear zone thing?
Clear distance.
What are the factors we're thinking about?
Well, you got the intersection sight distance too for.
Right, sight distance. Is it local? What's the speed? There's lots of other things we need, right? Or we think we need.
It's not ADA compliant.
Not ADA compliant, so there's pet issues there too.
It's a four-way stop, and assuming there are signs on the other approaches, it appears to be pretty safe, but part of that's because it appears to be a low
Right.
speed, maybe not, but it appears to be low speed.
Sure. And you got parking, or you could have parking. You got, by the way, I have to bring this up because I teach MUTCD, manual uniform truck. That four-way is a shall not, okay? You will use all-way. That's a shall. You switch those out when you need to.
What if it's a five-way intersection?
That's all-way.
No, but it's not
Right.
always stops. Only one.
Well, then you use, there's another sign they now have. Right. Oh, for this instance, sorry. I'm getting into my MUTCD mode. So right, if there's another leg or something, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff we're not seeing. By the way, we have a few more here. Safe or unsafe, and why do you think?
It's pretty safe because there's nobody there.
Safe, there's nobody there. What questions do you want answered?
Drainage.
It's a drainage issue. For those of us from Iowa, what am I thinking about?
Those poles are in the clear.
Minnesota. I'm thinking about ice. What else are we thinking about? Is there
Hydroplaning.
hydroplaning? Does it matter how often this happens?
Yeah.
Does it matter what the volume is?
Well, if it's
Yeah.
always like that, then people know it's like that. So
Then there's that. Then we just have a narrow lane situation. But yeah, it matters, right? This could be a once in a 500-year situation for us, again, up north. But yeah, all those questions need to be answered, right? So you're seeing what I mean by that. Safety is relative, safe. Safe or is this road safe? It appears to be going the wrong way. I noticed that too. There's actually another curve around that other curve.
The road might be safe, but that guy's house is not.
Right, the guy building this house could have a problem. There's actually a little narrow bridge around this corner and then another sharp left. So there's roadside situations, right? There's all kinds of things. We're not talking whether it's low cost or not at this point. We're just saying, listen, maybe, right? You see where I'm going with all this, right? This looks good to me, but what I'm wondering what would happen being from Iowa, whether that bean field was a cornfield on the inside of that curve, and what kind of impact that would have. It's all what year it is in Iowa. Every 3 years it's going to be corn or something like that, or every other year. So again, you see where I'm going with all this. Same kind of thing. What's low cost to you? Depends. What does it depend on? How many crashes you're preventing? If you're going to get into the benefit cost stuff, sure. What's that? Type of facility? Size of budget. Yeah. So again, the difference between a DOT and a local agency or city or a county, what low cost is different. And we're going to talk about a range of things. And some of them you go, roundabout is not low cost. And I'd say in some cases maybe it is. It just depends on your situation, okay? But we're not talking about blowing things out. So lots of different factors that come into this. And remember, again, sometimes someone mentioned this. It's just we're gonna do what we can until the big fix comes in. Problem is that big fix is often 20 and 30 years ago down the road, and that doesn't work very well. So we do what we can with what we've got. I think there's a session here, something about do what you can with where you are or something like that, one of the sessions in the next couple of days. Anybody want to mention a few? Well, we mentioned a few. Rumble strips, I mentioned the safety edge. What other low-cost safety improvements are out there? Edge lines. What's that? High friction. That could be another discussion. I don't think it comes up. We did a webinar a month or 6 weeks ago on high friction. It's recorded and on our website. Intersection lighting. Yeah, there we go. I was going to say, when's someone going to bring up signing? Signing and marking. Sure. This is a safety edge thing, yeah. Last but not least, nominal and substantive. So 20 years ago or whenever it is I learned about this, nominal safety is all about doing what you got to do because it's in the book, okay? That's my summary of all that, right? It's the green book, it's the roadside, and then there's substantive safety is I'm going to do something and I am going to have an impact on safety, okay? What's the impact going to be? What is my actual data-driven expected kind of impact? We're going to be talking about crash reduction factors and crash modification factors. So a lot of this stuff is not, we're learning more and more, which is the Highway Safety Manual. That came out in 2010, and we'll make a point of saying whether something's in the Highway Safety Manual or not. It's going to be updated here in another couple of years. A lot of this stuff was not necessarily based on safety and safety knowledge. It was based on best practices, okay? So that blew me out of the water. I've been following the Green Book and the guides and all that for years, and if someone were to say to me, and this was years ago, right? We now know this. What's the difference in the expected crash impacts of a 10-foot lane versus a 12-foot lane? It's in the Highway Safety Manual. We know that now. Before that, we didn't, right? Is there a big difference between an 11 and 12-foot lane with regard to safety on two-lane rural highways? No. 10 and 12? Bit more. 9 and 12, a lot. Yeah. If anybody's driven on an 18-foot roadway lately, and I did one in Iowa just recently, it's a little sketchy. But so we now know those impacts. The point is, I bring up lane width just as an example. There's a lot of stuff out there that still isn't based on, it's based on best practices. And so we really are in this continuum of safety, which is crash risk versus design dimensions. This is how nominal goes, right? We have this high crash risk, then we meet everything and it goes down and we're good. Has anybody ever opened up a roadway and someone gets in a crash the very next day and maybe even dies? I know I have seen that. So the point is that you can have designs that you've met all the guidance on and it's still not as safe as it could be because it's nominal. And there's other ones, though, where you need an exception. I call them exceptions, whatever you want to call them. And there's been research on exceptions, design exceptions, that show only certain ones actually have a huge impact on safety, or could have an impact. I used the word huge, I shouldn't have. Impact on safety, okay? You can have something that doesn't meet all the nominal stuff, and it can still be okay. So it's a continuum, is the thing to walk away with here. It's not just an absolute line. And what we're doing with the highway safety manual is we're learning more about that line, right? With all the different factors, crash reduction factors, crash modification factors. Does that make sense? Again, as a guy that taught and did geometric design, arterial design for years, when this happened, this just blew me out of the water. So you have situations like this. It's probably not a good example if you know the MUTCD. You have this curve, and you've got this advisory speed and a turn sign, and that meets MUTCD. Let's just say that it meets it. If you know a lot about MUTCD, you realize maybe it doesn't. Then you decide to add chevrons on because there's still people running off that curve, and you've got substantial safety, and you've improved the safety on the curve by adding something in addition to what you had to have. Okay? And that's the kind of stuff we're going to be talking about. If you looked at this situation, so there's a roadway out there, it's a 5-lane roadway, and if you had to make a decision, which one would you pick from a safety point of view? Is it obvious or not? Should we take a vote? I got a number 3 here. Turn lane, bus lane. This is existing, 5-lane with parking.
Depending on your needs, 3 is probably the best alternate. 2 is not bad.
Right. Just it depends on your needs, depends on your budget, all kinds of things. If I added this in, the decision might change, but then again, maybe it wouldn't, right? Because it's a continuum. You see this dramatic difference, right, that happens. That may have an impact on your decision making. If you're predicting crashes and this is what's going to happen. So whole point again is it's not always this is the one, right? Alternatives and what your needs are and things like that. Certainly if you close this entire median, what kind of discussions are you going to have? Businesses and economic development comes in as a factor, right? And that trade-off. And some of you probably had that discussion between economic development and safety. It's a hard discussion to have. So hopefully we've kind of gone through all this together and you understand this. So how many times higher is the fatality rate in rural areas than urban areas?
3.
2 to 3, yeah. Well, actually, I have 2 times. It's really 2.5 at this point, right? Which one would you pick? Safer, more safe, or safe? Safer, more safe, yep. I think there's one more. What type of safety is met when all required design criteria are met? We just talked about it. Nominal, yeah. Okay, good.